Recording in progress.
Okay, so the three psukim in this the run of psukim that we did last week, what we did last time 2 weeks ago. So three psukim in that run, at the very end, I didn't finish explaining them, and they require actually a little bit of intensive looking at. Now, one of the important things. Well, anyway, I'll bring up something at the end, but I don't have an answer for it. It's just a question. But the three psukim are as follows, and I'm going to treat them today as disconnected psukim. Because I'm not looking for to weave them together. I'm looking at really the message that each pasuk is saying to us. So the first pasuk is that, if you remember, the theme of this section of Mishlei was talking about the things, the advantages that a person gets from connecting them to God, connecting themselves to God and to Torah. Right, praiseworthy is a person who has found wisdom, v'adam yafik tfuna, and a person who gives forth understanding. Ki tov sachar mischak kosef. We said that Torah is more valuable than even silver, than gold. Right, it was a very beautiful run of psukim. And then at the end of it, we said orich yamim biyamina, that length of days is at its right, bismola osher v'chavod, and at its left is wealth and honor. Derachea darchenom, its ways of pleasantness. V'chol nesivoseh shalom, and all of its little byways are peace. Eitz chayim hi l'machazikim ba v'samchel meushar. It is a tree of life for those that hold on to it, and for those that support it is praiseworthy. It's interesting, by the way, that if you look at the order of Psukim 17 and 18, that 17, Derachea darchenom, comes before Eitz Chaim. When we put away the Torah on Shabbos, we say Eitz Chaim hi l'machazikim ba v'samchel meushar. Derachea darchenom v'chol nesivoseh shalom. We switched the order of those two psukim. So it bothered me a lot this morning. I spent a long time looking for it. I found somebody who asked the question and says, we need to find an answer. Thank you very much. Right? No, the Sefer brought up the problem, but didn't bring up a solution. So I've limited, even though it looks like I have a lot of svarim, but I've limited svarim here. My davening svarim are actually still in America. And I even know what sefer I could go to get the answer to this question, and I just don't have it. So I'm going to try to, Mitzvah Shem, over the next week, I'm going to try to see if I can find that sefer and come up with an answer. Because there's got to be something very fundamental as to why it's switched between Mishlei and davening. There's got to be some meaning change between the two. But we're going to deal with it today just in the terms, in the context of Mishlei. First of all, what does this pasuk mean? And this pasuk is actually a well-known pasuk. The Gemara talks about it. So I think that we have to understand, for the simple understanding of that pasuk is that the Gemara says that the way you have to read the word biyamina is lemayaminim ba. Mayaminim, the word yamin is the right hand, and the word small is the left hand. When you do something, and I'm a lefty, so I'm an exception to the rule, but I recognize that when you do something, we say you do it. That we say the hand of God is the right hand. We do all the mitzvahs that we do with our right hand. Kol pina shata paina. All turns that you take to the right, because that's the side of the Shekhinah. That's the side of God. That's the side of godliness. When we go up the altar and we sprinkle the blood in the morning, we go up to the top of the altar, and then we turn to the right. In our Shemona Esrei, which I'm not going to do now, but in our Shemona Esrei, which is a facsimile, it is modeled after the daily sacrifice in the temple, and that every morning when the Kohen sprinkled the blood on the altar, our Shemona Esrei, the brachos of our Shemona Esrei, are modeled after that, the directions that they go in, the four groups, the middle 13 brachos of the Shemona Esrei, the four groups of those middle 13 brachos, with one bracha as the fulcrum in between, because there are 13 brachos, but it's four groups of 3 brachos. They are to the directions. They are to the north, to the west, to the east, and to the south. When I say to the directions, because every direction has a certain koach, has a certain power, and the brachos are geared towards those power in the same way that the Kohen Gadol sprinkled blood in those directions every single morning. And he went to the right, because everything you do, you go to the right. You hold the Kiddush cup, we hold it in our right hand. We say Shema, we cover our eyes with the right hand. We wrap our tefillin, we wrap with the right hand. We put it on the left hand, but we wrap with the right hand. All mitzvahs that we do when you make a bracha on a piece of food, the preferred way is to have the food in your right hand, and then you make a bracha. So you're yotze the bracha even without that. But the point is that everything we do with our right hand, because the right hand is the hand of God. It also is the hand of consciousness. In other words, if this is God connectedness, then that hand means you're doing something with your right hand with your strong hand. You're doing it with full force. I don't know by everybody else, but by me, my other hand, notice my left hand is very strong. My right hand is almost like a bracha levatala, right? My right hand is almost like, it needs to be there, but it doesn't do much, right? It looks good, but it doesn't function much. The only thing I can do is I can play hockey. When I play ice hockey, I play with a righty, but that's it. Other than that, my right hand, it could, if my right hand fails my knee, it's not going to really make a difference. Right? It doesn't do much. But I understand that nevertheless, the left hand, is the stronger hand, the hand that's really the dominant hand. By me is the left again, by everybody else is the right. But that dominant hand is critical. It means when you do something, you're doing it with your dominant hand. By the way, the question was asked, do lefties do it with the other hand? There are some mitzvahs where everybody does it the same. There are some mitzvahs where the lefty does it with his left hand instead of his right hand. So when I hold my Kiddush cup, I hold my Kiddush cup in my left hand. Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach held that, I saw this once in a sefer, that he held that a Rav, who's a lefty, who is Mesader Kedushin, should hold it in his right hand so that people don't think that he's Nam Aretz. That people shouldn't think that he's ignorant and that he's doing it with the wrong hand. I think it's fascinating, mamish fascinating. I happen not to do that because it's my hand of preference. I can't really hold it with my right hand. It'll be all over the collar's dress. So when I'm a Sada Kedushin, I still do it with the left hand. But it was just very interesting that he held that just so that people shouldn't make a mistake. Lulav and esrog is also one of those interesting things because when you hold the lulav and the esrog, so you hold the lulav in the right hand because it has more mitzvahs, and you hold the esrog in the left hand. The lefty, according to many authorities, flips it and holds the lulav in the left hand and the esrog in the right hand. But now you have a problem. Because if you hold the lulav in the left hand, the hadassim are on the right side. The myrtles are on the right side. Conceptually, the aravos need to be on the left side, and that needs to be next to the esrog. The esrog represents the Jew that has both good smell and good taste. That means he's got the whole package, mitzvos and knowledge, and good midos. And you hold it next to the arava, which has nothing, no smell, no taste, so that the one will influence the other. But now when you switch hands, your hadassim are on the wrong side, because now it's your hadassim that are next to the esrog. So most poskim don't worry about it. There is a sefer called the Aruch LaNer, commentary on the Talmud, and the Aruch LaNer holds that you have to switch that also. So that's not halacha l'maisa. Most people don't do that. What I do is that when I make a bracha, I make a bracha, holding it in my left hand and the esrog in my right hand, and it's weird because it's sitting next to the hadassim. But then at some point, I also switch it around so that when I do one of the shakes that I do it like the right way. Anyway, be that as it may, doing something with your right hand, and again, this is not trying to stop people from being lefties, right? When that's not what the Torah is trying to do. But doing with the right hand is a concept. And the concept is you're doing it with full thrust and with full force. So what Shlomo Melech is telling us is that all of the stuff that we talked about, that it's so valuable and it's so beautiful, you have to know that that Orech Yomim is going to be its yield. Your days, we've spoken about this a lot. Your days are going to be full when they're filled with Torah, when they're filled with meaning. Days are full, but only biyamina, when you do it with your yamin, when you do it with your right hand, when you full thrust, you're all in. When you throw everything into it, that's when it's going to give the yield of Orech Yomim. Okay, but we don't all, every day, 365 days a year, we don't all have the koyach to be all in. So what happens to those that don't have the koyach to be all in? Bismola, the ones that end up doing it with the left hand, in other words, not all in, so then Osher v'chavod, it still has a yield. Osher v'chavod is a symbol of Olam Hazeh, this world. Wealth, honor, these are successes in this world. You will still be successful, even if you're not all in. You're doing it. You're not ignoring anything. You're not leaving out anything, but you're not necessarily all in. There is still a yield, but the yield is only limited to Olam Hazeh, to this world, as opposed to when you do it b'mayminim, when you do it with the right hand, when you do it all in. So then that yield is Orech Yomim, which is forever. That's both Olam Hazeh and Olam Haba. Now, what's interesting, I took two commentaries and I twisted them together because I really felt that they were saying the same thing. That it's not only, the one commentary says that the right hand means doing it for the right reasons, lishma, and the left hand is doing it for the wrong reasons, right? It's doing it with some ulterior motive. And even when you do something with an ulterior motive, so then it still has a yield. The other commentary says that the one is referring to Olam Hazeh and Olam Haba. And I think that the two of them are really ultimately the same thing, that when you do it all in, the yield is going to be an everlasting yield. It's going to be an eternal yield. When you do it partially, when you do it, sort of, half-baked, so then there is a yield, but that yield is not an everlasting yield. Okay. So I think that Shlomo Melech here is just throwing in that not only does it yield a lot, but how do you get the maximum yield out of Torah? How do you get the maximum yield out of the gold and silver that Torah is likened to? You have to be all in. Being all in is actually much more complicated than you think. I was just saying this over in another shir recently, that we don't even realize how distracted we are in life. And when I say distracted, not just because things are busy, but distracted as far as the value of Torah. Because you could ask a person, what is the most valuable thing in the world? And they'll tell you Torah. It's not even a question. There's nothing to talk about. It's definitely Torah. But then when you start to dismantle your life, or start to look at your life carefully, you realize that there are sometimes other things that end up being priorities, and those things are not necessarily Torah. Now, and again, I don't mean things that we do, but it's things that we value, and there are sometimes things that we value that are actually in competition with our Torah, not necessarily contradictions, but in competition. I think I can give an example. I don't know how pleasant of an example it is, but I can give an example like this. That, sometimes people say, what's the most important value? So family. Family is not the most important value. I just want to see if I've shocked you. I'll try it one more time. Family is not necessarily the most important value. Torah is the most important value. And then family fits into Torah. In other words, within the context of Torah, family is the most important thing. Because many people would think that if family is a value equal to Torah, that means that if I have to make a compromise, and I'm not talking about, just a small halachic compromise, which sometimes you're allowed to. I'll just give an example. There are sometimes when you go to ask a Rav, my parents or my children are not so makbid on kashrus. Is there certain things that I can be lenient with so that I can go and visit and not cause, not be such an uncomfortable thing? And you'd be surprised that if you ask the right Rav, there are certain things, I'm not saying everything, there are certain things that you can do, but that's within the context of halacha. See, when you step outside of that, so then you look at a family uber alis, well, I'm going to eat and it's not kosher, but it doesn't matter because I'm not making a fight, because family uber alis. That's when family competes with Torah. Just using that as an example. There is, and that's why the first value, the right hand, has to be Torah, and then everything else has to fit into that. Shlomo Melech is not saying something that's light here; it's saying something that's very heavy. That we have to recognize that in order for this whole thing to work the way it's supposed to work, we have to approach it with the right hand. And that when you approach it with the right hand, so then all these yields, all these things that we're supposed to get from it, they're all going to come to us. Okay, let's take a look at the next pasuk. Diracheha darchei noam v'chol nesivosea shalom. So the obvious question we want to ask all of us, based on everything we learned so far in Mishlei, Diracheha and nesivosea. Why are there two? It's really just poetic here. It's to tell me Diracheha darchei noam. It's ways are ways of pleasantness. You just told me everything I need to know. So why do you have to repeat it? V'chol nesivosea shalom. And why are you changing it? The first time you're talking about dirachim, and the second time you're talking about nesivos, right? You're talking about ways and paths, byways. What's the difference? And what's the difference between noam and shalom? That noam is connected to diracheha, and shalom is connected to nesivosah. Who asks questions like this? Does anybody remember? We spent a lot of time in the beginning. One of the commentaries always asks questions like this. The Vilna Gaon. This is the Gruz approach to Mishlei. He necessarily say it over here. I'm using his approach though, because I'll tell you what I see in this pasuk. We know that the ways of Torah are pleasant. If Torah is causing strife and it's causing difficulty, so then either it's not the Torah that's causing that difficulty, or you're not doing the Torah correctly. Because if you're doing it correctly, it can't cause strife. If you're doing it with an eye towards towards others, an eye towards pleasantness, it can't cause strife. If it's causing strife, it means it's either the other person's issue, that the other person's feeling guilty about it, which, by the way, this past week's two weeks ago's Pasha. Vayivas Esav HaBechora. If I have, I have certain teachings in my repertoire, which I feel are like critical teachings. This is one of them. Esav sells the Bechora. After he sells the Bechora, it says he hates the Bechora. So you have to hate the Bechora for. Just sell it. Make money, baby. Like, that's not a bad thing. I mean, it's bad because you're selling something very spiritual. But at the end of the day, it was a business transaction. He sold it for a thing of soup. I mean, Yaakov clearly got the better deal, but fine. But it was a sale, legal sale. So why did he have to hate the Bechora? Because after the sale, he looked at himself and he said, I can't believe what I just did. For a bowl of lentil soup, it wasn't even like it was fleischiks, there wasn't even a piece of meat in there. For a bowl of lentil soup, this is what I sold my life away for? What an idiot I am. And what a weakling I am. That I didn't have the strength to look at it and say, don't give in, don't give that up. If your brother thinks that you're not worthy to be the firstborn, then you better work at it, because you have the potential to do that. You can rise to the occasion. And I blew the opportunity to rise to the occasion. Once you recognize you blew the opportunity, you now have two choices. You can either buck up and rise to the occasion, or you can say, you know what? It's really not worth anything anyway. And I did not rise to the occasion. I'm actually a smart person. I let something stupid go because it's useless. I don't need it. And therefore I didn't fail, because there was nothing to fail at. This is a mechanism that we use, not always, can you be conscious of it, but we use this all the time. Children are great at it. Child gets in trouble. Parent says to the child, you can't go out next week. Child says, okay, I didn't want to go anyway. Now, there are two reasons why the child does that. One is because that is a knife in the heart of the parent, because the parent thought they were punishing the child, and the child saying, nanny, 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 you're not punishing me. But it's also the child's mechanism, that the child is using a mechanism and saying, I didn't fail. I'm not bad, and I didn't come short, because the thing that you're taking away from me was something that I felt was useless anyway. Vayivaz Esav es ha-bechora. He hated the Bechora. It's just a great thing to know. A lot of times when we get angry, we get angry at another person. We're getting angry at ourselves. And we're getting angry because we really realize that we came up short on something. But it's much easier to cast the blame externally, to cast it outside, rather than to have to look inside and say, I need to change this. And that's exactly what Esav did. Vayivez Esav es ha-bechora. Okay, when in mitzvos, when we're finding a lot of anxiety and things, the anxiety is not always being caused by the thing itself. It's being caused by our relationship to it. because deracha darchei noam, because its ways are ways of pleasantness. The first thing we have to worry about when we do a mitzvah is that we have to worry, is this deracha darchei noam? Am I doing it in a way that is going to inspire others, that is going to be pleasant, or am I doing it in a way that people are going to just feel so put on and so uncomfortable and so, is that really what the Torah wants? And then cause them to question even more fundamental things. The derech is the big public road. It's the road that everybody's standing on. When we do the Torah right, diracha darchei noam, oh my gosh, it is so pleasant and beautiful. V'chol nesivoseha, and then when I'm alone, in the nesivos, in the little back roads and the back alleys, then I have to worry, is it shalom? Is it whole inside of me? The first thing I have to worry about, is it whole with the way it looks to you? But then I have to make sure that it's shalom, shalem, complete inside of myself. And again, when it's being done correctly, both the dirachim and the nesivos, both of them are pleasant and beautiful and whole. I'll tell you an unbelievable story. You know what? Rather than me tell this story, I'm gonna play a video. It's a 3-minute story. It is the most, I would say, of the Gedolim stories that I tell, of the rabbi stories that I tell, I think it's one of the most inspiring stories I ever heard. 1 second. I just have to figure out how to do this. It should take me only 1 minute. One second. Here we go. Okay, now let me do this, put it on hold. Then I go to share screen. I want you to hear the sound also. Okay, I'm hoping the sound will come through on this. Can you hear it? You can't hear it? No. You can't hear it? Okay, so I'll just tell over the story. So he tells over like this. He says 40 years ago, it actually was a little bit longer than that, but there were yeshiva bachrim that there was a common shtick going on. My father actually tells about this, that they used to, I shouldn't say yeshiva bachrim, everybody did this, kids did this, but they would make prank calls, and they would call, like my father said, they used to call like a smoke shop, and they would say, "Do you have Prince Albert in the can?" Prince Albert was a pipe smoke, was a tobacco that was used for pipes. So they would say, "Do you have Prince Albert in the can?" And the proprietor would say, "Yes." So the prank caller would say, "I think you better let him out. He might suffocate." Silly things like that. There was a tkufa, there was a period where there were kids that were calling rabbanim. And they were asking rabbanim like fake shilas and driving them a little bit crazy. It's funny, one of my sons once did this to my wife. He called up. For 34 years, we had people. It was a huge area. People came to visit. It was a big tourist thing. people would always call, and they would have to speak to me directly, and they would ask about the kashrus, about the restaurants, and the kashrus is mine. I mean, I gave the hashgacha and everything. So they would ask, and who are you? Where did you learn? What are your credentials? Sometimes really very annoying. So my son called my wife, changed his voice a little bit, and he did this whole shtick on her, like going through, questioning, does your husband, does he do this during davening? Does he do like trying to find out how religious I was? And my wife was, Baruch Hashem, answering him everything. And he was like trying to get her riled up, and he couldn't get her riled up. And he said, "Mom, it's me." It was just a funny thing. Anyway, so they would call Rabbanim, and they would ask Rabbanim bogus questions. So the turn came to one kid, and he drew Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein was the Gadol Hador, died in 1986, I'm sorry. He was the Gadol Hador, who's recognized as the giant of all poskim, from the black hat world to the non-black hat world to Israel to America. He was recognized as the Posek Hador. He calls the house. The Rebbetzin answers the phone. He says, "The Rav is sleeping. Should I wake him up?" And the young man says, "Yes." Ki'ilu, it's a critical shaila. Moshe comes to the phone. The kid asks the shaila. Moshe realized that it was bogus. Moshe said to the boy, he said, "Where do you learn? What yeshiva do you learn in?" Boy didn't want to tell him. He was having annoying. "I'm afraid I'm going to get in trouble." Moshe said, "No, you're not going to get in trouble. Don't worry. I would never get you in trouble." "What yeshiva do you learn?" He told him yeshiva. He said to the boy, and the boy was not a particularly good kid in the yeshiva. He said to him, "What are you learning?" He told him the tractate. What page are you on? He told him the page. And there Moshe, without a Gemara, started to talk to this kid in learning. And he walked him through the page of the Gemara. And after he explained a few things to him, he said to the kid, "Do you understand?" The kid said, "No, not really." So Moshe did it again. Moshe, there's a dispute in the story. Some say 3 times, some say 4 times. Moshe went over it with this boy. He taught him this page of Gemara. Then he went, one of the commentaries on the side of the page of Gemara is called Tosfos. He took one of the Tosfoses and he learned it with the boy. And then after he learned the Tosfos with the boy, this is an hour, by the way, an hour. He learned the Tosfos with the boy. He says to the boy, he says, "Boy, I have a tremendous question on this Tosfos." So he tells the boy, he tells him the question. He says to the boy, "Do you understand the question?" The boy says, "No." He's taught it to him again. Again, finally, he says to the kid, "Did you get the question?" The kid says to Moshe, "Rabbi, that's like an amazing question. That's like, I can't even, I'm so full. That's amazing." Moshe said, "Tomorrow, when your Rebbe teaches you that Tosos, I want you to ask him that kasha. You don't have to say my name, you ask him that kasha." The next day, the boy goes into yeshiva. The Rebbe teaches the Tosos, and the boy asks the question. The Rebbe was shocked that this boy even knew where the Tosos was, let alone could understand the Tosos, let alone could ask a question on the Tosos. He says to the boy, "Where'd you get that from?" Kid says, "Moshe, I got it from Rav Feinstein." The Rebbe was blown away. He said, I don't have an answer to that question. It's such a good kasha." For the whole week, the Rebbe was like crazed about the question. He was working on it. Thursday, the Rebbe comes into the class and he says, "I got it. I was working on it all night. I got an answer to that kasha." And he told the boys the answer, and he engaged the boys so much that the kids were like flipping from the answer. This boy goes home, and his parents see that he's upset. He goes into his room. He doesn't come out for hours. The parents come into the room. They say to him, "What's the matter?" He's crying. So the boy says, "I can't believe what I did. I can't believe that I called her Moshe. But what's most amazing to me," the kid was a teenager, is that Rav Moshe believed in me. Rav Moshe believed. He didn't get mad that I called him at 11 o'clock at night and asked him some stupid question. Rav Moshe sat and learnt with me and taught me Torah, And he said, you can do this. I can do this. I can't believe I've not done this until now. The kid today is a Rebbe in a yeshiva. They don't tell his name of who he is, but he is a well-known, successful Rebbe in a yeshiva because he tasted Diracheha Darchei Noam V'chol Nesivas HaShalom. He tasted that beauty of Torah and that pleasantness of Torah. And that's the key. Shlomo Melech is telling us. You wanna make a difference in your own Yiddishkeit and in the world's Yiddishkeit, then focus on this. Diracheh darchei noam. It's gotta be pleasant, and it's gotta be about shleimus. It's gotta be about wholeness, not about leaving, compromising, breaking, twisting. That's not shalom. That's not noam. Noam is taking what we have and doing it in a way of ne'imus, in a way of sweetness, in a way of shleimus, in a way of wholeness. That's where you have a chance of making a difference. Okay, I didn't get to the third pasuk. I got to stop here. I didn't get to the third pasuk. We'll get to that next time. Hopefully I'll have an answer for why the psukim are inverted for the way we do it in davening, but also Eitz Chaimi L'Machazikim Ba has to do with this week's parsha. I'll just tell you very, very, very quickly, where does that have to do with this week's parsha? Yaakov fights with the angel, right? Where does the angel hit him? In the legs. Why does he hit him in the legs? So one set of answers has to do with where he hit him in the leg, near the groin, and that he hit him, that it was symbolic of children. But it's also just symbolic of legs. Eitz Chaim Hi L'Machazikim Ba. It's a tree of life to those that hold on to it. V'tomcha, and those that support it. V'tomcha mu'ushar. Those that support it will be fortunate. He hit him. You can't destroy the Torah, but you can take away the support of the Torah. You can starve the Torah, and that's what Esav tried to do. That's what the future vision is. I did it too fast. I'll do it slower next time. But that's the hit him in the leg, because the legs are the tomcha, the supporters of Torah. You can have all the Torah you want, but you have no supporters. And I just don't just mean financial supporters, but people creating an atmosphere. You don't have that, you got nothing. I'll talk about it more next time. Okay, so if anybody wants to daven, say if anybody's yet saying Tehillim today, so Shoshana bas Chana Rachel.
Say that again.
Shoshana bas Chana Rachel. Okay, everybody should have a beautiful, wonderful, amazing week. And we'll see you next week. I'm sorry? Amen. Amen. Thank you.
Give it our best.
Okay, I will. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Be well, everyone.
Bye, guys.